The sound is what you notice first. A low, rhythmic shoosh-shoosh-shoosh of an oiled cloth moving with practiced ease over a long stretch of steel. It's a patient sound, a careful sound, and it cuts through the oppressive quiet of the room. The air here is thick enough to taste, a heavy cocktail of bitter iron from the nearby printing press, the sharp, almost rancid scent of whale oil from the sputtering lamps, and the acrid bite of wet ink being slapped onto cheap, porous paper. A few candles flicker, their small flames throwing long, dancing shadows that make the leaning stacks of Patriot broadsheets look like forgotten tombstones in a crowded churchyard. This is the quiet, anxious heartbeat of a revolution. A story not of grand declarations shouted from balconies, but of the dangerous, private moments that truly fuel them. A lawyer's sharp tongue defending a lost cause, a silversmith's cruel ambition, and here, in the dim light, a soldier's steady hands preparing a musket for a war that hasn't officially begun. And you're right in the middle of it. Honestly, you probably won't survive this. At least, not emotionally. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly means the world. And in the comments, let me know where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you. It's always nice to see where we all are in the world as we settle in. Alright, hi guy. Tonight we journey back to 1776, a year that'll either ignite your imagination with the fire of revolution, or, let's be perfectly honest, leave you utterly bored by the politics of men in wigs. You're there, in this dimly lit Patriot newspaper office, the scent of ink and a very specific kind of fear hanging heavy in the air. Now, dim the lights if you can, maybe turn on a fan for that soft, ambient background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You can feel the weight of history in your hands, a palpable pressure, almost as heavy as the musket being cleaned just a few feet away from you. The soldier doesn't look at you. He doesn't look at anyone. His focus is entirely on the task at hand. He's young, maybe 20, with a face that hasn't yet decided if it belongs to a boy or a man. His knuckles are red and raw from the cold outside, but his movements are anything but clumsy. They are a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the Boston streets you just escaped, where whispers of rebellion are turning into shouts. He disassembles the lock mechanism with a surgeon's precision. Click. The frizzen comes free. Clack. The cock is laid gently on the rough-hewn table. Each piece is wiped down, inspected, and oiled, a small personal ritual against the great, impersonal tide of what's coming. His silence is a universe unto itself, a pocket of calm in the burgeoning storm. And then, that universe is shattered by a voice. To suggest that a man's loyalty is measured by the flag he salutes rather than the truth he speaks is not just fallacious, it is the very definition of tyranny dressed in patriotic clothes. Quote, "The voice is clear, sharp, and carries an edge of cultivated steel. It belongs to Eunice Lee." You turn your head, your eyes adjusting from the soldier's quiet meditation to the source of this verbal fire. There she is, standing near the great, silent printing press, a lone woman holding court in a room full of nervous men. She's a lawyer, and from the looks of it, a damn good one. She isn't tall, but she occupies the space as if she were a giant. Her hair is pinned up with a severity that seems to dare a single strand to fall out of place, and her dress, while practical, is of a finer cut than anyone else's. It's her eyes, though, that hold you. They are dark, intelligent, and brimming with a confidence that borders on pure, unadulterated arrogance. She is a peacock in a room of pigeons, and she knows it. She's addressing a small circle of men, a printer with ink-stained fingers, a portly merchant wringing his hands, and a young apprentice who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. They are the committee for the newspaper, the New England Beacon, and they are terrified. "Miss Lee," the portly merchant sputters, his face slick with sweat despite the chill. "Your client was arrested for distributing pamphlets that openly call for the overthrow of His Majesty's government. There is no truth to be found in such blatant sedition." Eunice offers a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. It's a predator's smile. "Sedition, Master Gable, or is it simply an opinion you are too cowardly to voice yourself, but are more than happy to print for $1 a copy?" Quote. The man flushes a deep, satisfying crimson. You can't help but feel a small, sleepy smile tug at your own lips. She's good. "The argument," she continues, taking a step forward, her voice dropping slightly but losing none of its intensity, "is not about the legality of the pamphlets. We all know they are illegal under the current, and I use the term loosely, Law. The argument is about the seizure of my client's property. The Crown's men, acting on the word of an informant, stormed his shop and took not only the pamphlets, but his ledger, his personal effects, and 2 crates of goods unrelated to his printing business. They had no warrant for such a seizure. None. She pauses, letting the weight of that word hang in the air. None. This isn't about one man's rebellion, gentlemen. This is about the principle of property, the sanctity of a man's home and business. If they can do it to him, a simple printer, they can do it to you, Master Gable. They can do it to any of us. All they need is an accusation. She glances pointedly at the printer, whose face has gone pale. Perhaps from a competitor, a silversmith, for instance, who finds your success inconvenient. Quote, "The jab is subtle, but it lands. You've heard whispers of a silversmith named James Madison, a man with friends in high places and a reputation for using the Crown's authority to settle his personal and professional scores. Eunice has just painted him as the villain without ever speaking his name." Her words are tiny, precise hammer blows against the injustice of the Crown, each syllable chipping away at the men's fear and replacing it with a slow-burning anger. The air crackles with her energy. You find your gaze drifting back to the soldier. He hasn't moved. He continues his work, now reassembling the musket with the same deliberate care. Click. The cock is secured. Clack. The frizzen is tested, snapping shut with a satisfying finality. It's a strange harmony. Her words are the theoretical argument for freedom, the intellectual fire of the revolution. His hands, methodically preparing a tool of lethal force, are the physical reality of it. One cannot exist without the other. She is arguing for a nation of laws and rights, but his musket is what will be required to build it. Eunice seems to feel your gaze, or perhaps she just feels the shift in the room's energy. Her eyes find the soldier. For a moment, the arrogance melts away, replaced by something more complex, something weary. Her gaze softens as she watches his hands, the same hands her cousin William has, the hands of a scout who knows the woods better than the city streets. William, who is out there somewhere, relying on his calm and his rifle to stay alive. A flicker of her adventurous spirit seems to dim, reminded of the real stakes. This isn't a game of rhetoric in a dusty office. She straightens her shoulders, the mask of the arrogant lawyer snapping back into place. "So you see, gentlemen," she says, her voice ringing with renewed conviction, "you will print my defense of the man. You will print it on the front page. Because his fight is not his own. It is ours. And if we do not stand for him now, who will be left to stand for us when they come for the ink in your press and the coin in your pocket?" Quote, "There is no response. There doesn't need to be. She has won." The printer gives a slow, reluctant nod. Eunice gives a sharp, satisfied nod in return, turns on her heel, and the energy she brought into the room seems to go with her, leaving behind only the cold dread and the smell of oil and ink. And as she passes you, you feel the faint breeze of her movement, and you look from her departing back to the soldier, who has finished his task. He props the musket against the table, its bayonet lug gleaming in the candlelight. His work is done. For now. He finally looks up, his young, old eyes meeting yours for just a second, and in them you see the quiet, terrifying certainty of what comes next. The silence left in Eunice's wake is a vacuum, and the city of Boston rushes in to fill it. First, it's a distant, single peal of a bell, a questioning, tentative sound. Then another answers, deeper, more certain. Within minutes, the air itself begins to vibrate, a cacophony of joy as every church steeple in the city joins the chorus. The sound pours through the open door of the newspaper office, through the thin glass of the windows, shaking the dust from the rafters. It's a riot of bronze and brass, a sound so immense it feels physical, pushing against your chest, demanding you listen. The revolution has found its voice, and it is the sound of 1,000 bells ringing for a freedom that, until this moment, was only a whispered prayer. The young soldier, the one with the ancient eyes, straightens up. He grabs his musket, gives you one last, unreadable look, and walks out into the sound, swallowed by the promise of what is to come. You follow, compelled by the noise, drawn out of the stale, ink-choked air and into the living, breathing city. The street is a river of people. It's July, hot and suffocating, and the air smells of sweat, horse manure, and the sharp, celebratory tang of gunpowder from pistols fired into the sky. Faces swim past you in a dizzying torrent, jubilant, terrified, defiant, confused. A cooper, his apron still dusted with sawdust, lifts his young daughter onto his shoulders so she can see. She waves a small, crudely stitched flag. A look of pure, uncomplicated delight on her face. You are pushed and jostled, carried along by a current of human emotion so powerful, it feels like it could level the brick buildings on either side of the lane. This is it. The abstract argument from the newspaper office has been made real, signed in ink hundreds of miles away in Philadelphia, and now declared in a roar of bells and voices. You can feel the word taking root in the very soil beneath your feet. Independence. And there, in the heart of the chaos, is Eunice Lee. She stands on the steps of the townhouse, a small island of deliberate purpose in the churning sea of the crowd. The severe bun of her hair has come slightly undone, a few dark tendrils escaping to frame a face flushed with triumph. She is not shouting. She doesn't need to. She is speaking to a small group gathered around her. But her energy, her sheer presence, radiates outward. The portly merchant, Master Gable, is there, his face no longer slick with fear, but shining with a convert's zeal. He nods enthusiastically at her every word. She has them. She has all of them. Her arrogance is no longer a grating quality. It is a beacon. In a world suddenly unmoored from its king, people are desperate for someone who seems to know, with absolute certainty, which way the tide is turning. Her eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes, scan the crowd, and for a moment, they lock with yours. A flicker of recognition. She gives you the slightest of nods, a shared secret passing between you. The secret of the quiet room. The oiled musket. The conversation that was the seed of this wild, glorious harvest. She turns back to her audience, her voice rising with practiced passion. They called it sedition! They called it treason! But today, gentlemen, today the Continental Congress has called it the cause of a new nation. Quote, a cheer erupts from the men around her, and it ripples outward, merging with the general din. You feel a smile on your own face, a genuine, unbidden surge of hope. It's intoxicating. For a single, perfect moment, anything seems possible. But then your gaze drifts. It slides past the cheering faces and lands on a scene unfolding just a few yards away, near a horse trough. A woman, her back ramrod straight, is fussing with the collar of a young man's coat. It's not just a coat. It's a uniform. The blue wool is coarse, the fit clumsy on his lanky frame. He can't be more than 17. He looks just like the soldier from the printing press, another boy being asked to do a man's killing. The woman, his mother, smooths his lapels with hands that tremble. She is trying to smile, a desperate, brittle thing that shatters before it can fully form. Her son looks away from her, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the cheering crowd with a desperate sort of hunger, as if trying to absorb enough patriotism to see him through whatever comes next. The mother says something you can't hear, her voice lost in the noise. Then she lifts a hand to her son's cheek, her composure finally breaking. A single tear traces a path through the grime on her face. He doesn't move. He can't. To acknowledge her tear would be to acknowledge his own fear, and he cannot afford that. The glorious abstract idea of a new nation, the one Eunice is championing so eloquently, here becomes a painful concrete reality. A mother's heart breaking on a crowded street. The joyous bells suddenly sound different to you, harsher. They are not just celebrating a birth. They are tolling for the dead who have not yet fallen. A fine day for traitors and fools. The voice is like a shard of ice down your spine. It's low, cultured, and dripping with contempt. You turn and see him. James Madison. Not the future president, of course, but the silversmith, the loyalist, the man Eunice had warned the printers about. He is immaculately dressed in a fine waistcoat of dark silk, his silver-buckled shoes somehow untouched by the filth of the street. He stands with two other men, their expressions a mixture of disgust and amusement as they watch the spectacle. Madison's confidence is a tangible thing, a cloak of superiority he wears with ease. He isn't afraid. He is offended. He sees you looking and offers a cold, dismissive smile. It's a smile that says you are a gnat, a piece of the rabble, unworthy of his notice. But his rude pronouncement was loud enough to carry. It cuts through the nearby pocket of celebration, and it reaches the steps of the townhouse. You see Eunice stiffen. Her head snaps in Madison's direction. The triumphant flush drains from her face, replaced by the familiar sharp-edged mask of the lawyer. The adventurous spirit that reveled in the crowd's energy now zeroes in on its target. She excuses herself from her admirers and descends the steps, moving through the crowd with a predator's grace. "Master Madison," she says, her voice dangerously pleasant, "I am surprised to see you out enjoying the festivities. I had assumed you'd be in your shop, polishing the king's silver while you still can." Quote. Madison turns to her fully, his sneer deepening. "Miss Lee, ever the firebrand. Tell me, when they erect the gallows in this square, will you offer your legal services to the condemned? Or will you be too busy climbing the steps yourself?" A hush falls over the small section of the crowd around them. The celebration continues unabated 50 feet away. But here, a bubble of cold tension has formed. "The only thing being erected in this square, sir," Eunice retorts, her voice like flint, "is a monument to the liberty you and your kind are too fearful to embrace. You mistake loyalty to a tyrant for honor. It is a common error of the weak-willed." Quote, "Weak-willed?" Madison laughs, a short, ugly sound. "My will and my business are secured by the most powerful army and navy in the world. Your liberty is secured by farmers with pitchforks and loud-mouthed women who fancy themselves politicians. We will see whose will is weaker when General Howe's fleet arrives in New York Harbor. This celebration will be a short one." He glances meaningfully toward the mother and her uniformed son, who are now parting, the boy melting into a group of other young recruits. "You send boys like that to die for your pretty words, Miss Lee. You should be ashamed." Quote, "For the first time, you see a crack in Eunice's armor. The mention of General Howe, the fleet, the dying boys, it all lands. Her gaze flickers, and you know she's thinking of William, her cousin, the scout, a man who is not a boy, but who is just as mortal. The cost, so clear in the mother's tear, is now thrown in her face by her antagonist. But the crack seals as quickly as it appeared. She draws herself up, her arrogance, her shield. Those boys go to fight for a future. You cling to a past. They are braver than you will ever be. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a new nation to celebrate. You have a king to mourn." Quote, she turns her back on him, without waiting for a reply, a gesture of ultimate dismissal. Madison's face twists in a flash of genuine anger, but he says nothing more. He gives a curt nod to his companions, and they push their way through the crowd, vanishing like specters at a feast. Eunice stands alone for a moment, the energy of the confrontation leaving her. She watches the crowd, but her focus is gone. The joyous shouts and ringing bells seem to wash over her without effect. The confidence is still there, but it's now laced with something else, something weary. The victory feels less sweet, the cost more real. The sun begins to dip below the rooftops, casting long, dramatic shadows down the street. The bells are finally starting to fall silent, one by one, like tired soldiers laying down their arms for the night. The great, wild wave of emotion is receding, leaving behind the wet, cold sand of what comes next. A recruitment notice, the ink still tacky, has been slapped onto the brick wall of the townhouse. It calls for men, brave men, men like her cousin, men like the boy whose mother is now weeping alone by the horse trough. The celebration is over. The war has just begun. The air, thick with the unfulfilled promise of July thunder, seems to follow you south. The weeks after the declaration are a blur of frantic motion and fever dream stillness. The memory of the bells in Boston fades, replaced by the relentless, dusty clatter of carriage wheels on the long road to Philadelphia. The war is no longer a localized street brawl. It is a sprawling, ink-stained map of a problem, and you have followed the problem to its source. You are in a large, high-ceilinged room. Sunlight, thick with dust motes, slants through the tall Palladian windows, baking the wood and wool and worn leather of the chamber. The air is stagnant, smelling of sweat, old paper, and the faint, cloying scent of men's fear. This is the Pennsylvania State House. This is the room where the Declaration was signed. Now it is a furnace of anxiety where a nation is being hammered into existence on an anvil of doubt. This is the Continental Congress. There are no cheering crowds here, no triumphant bells. There is only the weary drone of a fat bluebottle fly bumping against a window pane, and the low, urgent murmur of debate. You see men slumped in their chairs, their wigs slightly askew, their faces etched with the strain of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. They are merchants, lawyers, and farmers, men who a year ago were concerned with crop prices and shipping manifests, now tasked with birthing a country while a king's army prepares to strangle it in the cradle. You watch John Adams, his face flushed and bullish, pace back and forth, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. He isn't walking so much as vibrating with impatience. "Patience, you say, sir?" he thunders, stopping to point a finger at a delegate from Maryland who had just counseled caution. "Washington has no patience to spare. He has no shoes for his men. He has no powder for his muskets. He faces the greatest military power on earth with an army of ghosts, and you counsel patience?" Quote. The room shifts uncomfortably. Every man here knows the truth of it. The letters from General Washington are a litany of desperation. They arrive weekly, their pages filled with requests for everything from flints to forage, their seals broken by hands trembling with the knowledge that they cannot provide what is asked. The grand idea of independence, so powerful on the streets of Boston, feels fragile and thin in this room. Your eyes find Eunice Lee. She is not a delegate, but she sits on a bench against the wall, a stack of papers resting in her lap. She was summoned for her legal mind to help draft articles regarding the confiscation of Loyalist properties to fund the war effort. But she has become more than a consultant. She is a silent witness, a fixed point of fierce intelligence in the swirling chaos. The arrogance she wore like armor in the newspaper office has been tempered here, beaten into something sharper, more focused. She is no longer just a peacock among pigeons. She is an eagle in a room of owls, seeing the night coming and calculating the odds. A delegate from Virginia, a tall, languid man, rises slowly. "Master Adams is correct in his passion, if not his volume," he says. His voice a calm river in the torrent of Adams's fury. "The question is not whether we need aid, but how we secure it. To appeal to the court of France as a supplicant is to invite them to become our new masters. We must appeal to them as an equal, a sister nation in the cause of liberty. And what do we offer them in return for this sisterhood?" A New Yorker scoffs. "Our boundless gratitude? The promise of trade when our ports are blockaded and our ships are burned?" Quote. The debate circles, endless and agonizing. The word France hangs in the stifling air, a mirage of ships and gold. You can feel the delegates' desperation as they wrestle with the paradox. To win their freedom from one king, they must indebt themselves to another. Eunice watches them, her dark eyes missing nothing. She makes a small note on the paper in her lap. You see her jaw tighten. She understands the argument, the high-minded rhetoric of liberty and equality. But she also sees the brutal arithmetic beneath it all. She is thinking of the cost, of the price being paid not in this room, but in the muddy fields and makeshift camps. You know with certainty that she is thinking of her cousin William, a scout, a man whose life depends not on the turn of a phrase in Philadelphia, but on the quality of the powder in his cartridge box and the thickness of the soles on his boots. The weight in the room becomes a physical thing pressing down on your shoulders. The fate of millions rests on these exhausted men, on their strained words and frantic calculations. The grand, abstract idea of a nation is here revealed for what it is, a desperate gamble, a house of cards built in a hurricane. You feel a chill despite the oppressive heat. The fly on the windowpane finally falls silent. The scene dissolves, the suffocating heat of the Congress replaced by a sudden sharp cold. The world contracts, shrinking from the grand stage of Philadelphia to the confines of a small, shadowed workshop in Boston. The sound is different here. Gone are the passionate speeches and anxious whispers. Here, there is only the delicate, rhythmic tap-tap scrape of metal on metal. You are watching James Madison, the silversmith, the loyalist, the man whose sneer you remember from the crowded street. His shop is a fortress. Heavy wooden shutters are bolted over the windows, blocking out the light and the hostile new world outside. A single lantern casts a pool of warm, focused light onto his workbench, which is an island of meticulous order in the gloom. Tiny hammers, files, and burins are arranged in perfect, gleaming rows. In his hands he holds a silver creamer, its surface a flawless mirror, except for the intricate chasing he is carefully tapping into its belly. His movements are precise, economical, and utterly absorbed. It's the same focused ritual you saw in the soldier cleaning his musket, a small act of control against an overwhelming chaos. A sudden, sharp crack against the outside shutter makes you jump. Madison doesn't flinch. His hand remains perfectly steady. He continues his work for another 3 beats, tap, scrape, before he sets the tool down with deliberate slowness. He lifts his head, And in the lantern light, you see his face is not the arrogant mask he wears in public. Here, in his sanctuary, his expression is one of profound, bone-deep weariness. The confident loyalist is gone, replaced by a man under siege. He rises and walks to the heavy oak door, listening. You can hear them now, the muffled voices outside. Young voices, drunk on cheap rum and patriotic fervor. Quote, Tory scum! Quote, ought to burn him out. Heard he's sending word to the regulars? Madison's shoulders slump for a fraction of a second. His knuckles are white where he grips the iron latch of the door. You feel the cold knot of fear in his stomach as if it were your own. This is his life now. His friends no longer greet him on the street. His clients have vanished, afraid to be associated with a king's man. The baker's boy who used to deliver his bread now spits on his stoop. He is an island, and the tide of revolution is eroding his shores with every passing day. You feel his anger, but it's an anger born of fear and a sense of profound betrayal. He believes in order. He believes in law. He believes that a man's property and person should be secured by the unassailable power of the crown, not subject to the whims of a shouting mob. What he sees happening outside is not the birth of liberty. It is the descent into anarchy, the unraveling of the very fabric of civilization. He looks around his shop at the beautiful, ordered things he creates with his hands, and he sees it all as fragile, breakable, about to be trampled under the muddy boots of men who call themselves patriots. He turns from the door, and his gaze falls on a half-finished piece on a side table, a gorget, the crescent-shaped piece of armor worn by officers. It's for a British major, a secret commission. It is his one remaining link to the world he understands, the world of hierarchy and authority. It is also, he knows, a death sentence if it is found. The shouting outside fades as the boys move on, looking for easier prey. The silence that returns to the shop is heavier, more threatening than the noise was. It is the silence of isolation. Madison walks back to his bench and picks up the silver creamer. He stares into his own distorted reflection on its curved surface. The face that looks back is pale, strained, and terribly alone. He is not just a villain in Eunice Lee's story. He is a man who has chosen a side, and in this new, divided continent, he is beginning to understand that his choice may cost him everything. The quiet desperation you see in his eyes is a mirror to the desperation you saw on the faces of the Congress. Both sides are trapped, gambling everything on a future they cannot control, terrified of what will happen if they lose. The silence in Madison's shop is a fragile, hollow thing, and you feel it shatter with the rest of Boston. It doesn't start with a shout or a bell, but with a low, distant thud that you feel more in your teeth than you hear with your ears. Another follows, and then another. A deep, rhythmic, gut-wrenching concussion. Cannon fire. Not the celebratory pistols of July, but the deep-throated roar of warships. The British have arrived. Not here, not yet. But the news comes on the wind, and in the panicked faces that suddenly fill the streets. The battle for New York has begun. The world outside the bolted shutters dissolves into a blur of motion. You are pulled from the claustrophobic quiet of the Loyalists' workshop and thrust into the raw, terrified heart of the city. The abstract arguments, the legal squabbles, the confident pronouncements, they all burn away like morning mist in the face of this new sun, a terrible dawn rising in the south. The war is no longer a coming storm. It is the hurricane making landfall. You are on a muddy road leading out of the city, part of a grim pilgrimage. Wagons piled high with frightened families and salvaged heirlooms trundle past, heading inland, away from the coast, away from the Royal Navy's reach. But you are moving against the current. Your path leads you toward the fight. Marching in the opposite direction are the men, columns of them. They are no longer the lone, thoughtful soldier from the newspaper office. They are an army, or the desperate attempt at one. You see them up close, their faces caked with dust and sweat. They are farmers from the western hills, their hands still calloused from the plow, their hunting shirts smelling of hearth smoke. They are fishermen from Salem and Gloucester, their eyes accustomed to squinting at the horizon, now fixed on the smoke-stained sky ahead. They are boys, so many boys, their new blue and buff uniforms hanging awkwardly on their shoulders, the bravado in their eyes warring with a stark, naked fear. A grizzled sergeant, his face a roadmap of old campaigns, barks orders that are nearly lost in the rumble of supply carts and the nervous whinnying of horses. They march with a grim determination, a shared understanding that the time for words has passed. The argument for freedom is now to be made with bayonets on the shores of Long Island. You find her not in a drawing room or a legislative hall, but in a place that smells of damp canvas, boiled cabbage, and human misery. A makeshift camp for Washington's army, hastily erected in the fields north of New York. The noise of the distant battle is a constant, grinding soundtrack. Here, amid the chaos of arriving militia and departing wounded, is Eunice Lee. The arrogant peacock is gone. Her fine dress has been replaced by a simple, dark skirt and a practical linen blouse, the sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her hair is still pinned up with its customary severity, but stray strands have escaped, clinging to her damp brow. There are smudges of ink on her fingers and a smear of dirt on her cheek she is unaware of. She sits on an overturned ammunition crate, a crude plank laid across two barrels, serving as her desk. The stack of papers is still with her, but now they are not legal briefs. They are letters, wills, and petitions. Her arrogance has not vanished. It has been reforged. It is no longer a weapon of social combat, but a tool of survival. You watch as a hulking, bearded corporal, a man who looks as if he could wrestle a bear, stands before her, shifting his weight and staring at his muddy boots, utterly intimidated. "They took my wagon, miss," he mumbles, his voice a low rumble. "Captain's orders said it was for the good of the cause. But it's my whole life, miss. My farm back in Connecticut, I can't." Eunice looks up from her papers, and her eyes are like chips of flint. "What is your name, Corporal?" "Stone. Jedediah Stone." She finds a piece of paper and dips her quill in a pot of ink. "Captain Miller, 3rd Company, Massachusetts line," she says, more to herself than to him. Her quill scratches across the page. Captain Miller has the authority to impress a wagon for military use. He does not have the authority to do so without providing a receipt of seizure, redeemable for fair value from the Continental Congress. She looks up at him, her gaze sharp. "Did he give you such a receipt, Corporal Stone?" Quote. The big man looks confused. A what, miss?" "No, of course he didn't." Eunice finishes writing with a flourish, sands the ink dry, and hands the paper to him. "Give this to Captain Miller. It is a legally binding writ, demanding either the immediate return of your property or a promissory note for its full value, co-signed by his commanding colonel. I have taken the liberty of citing the specific congressional article he is violating. I suspect he will find the wagon is not as essential to the cause as he first believed." Quote, Corporal Stone takes the paper as if it were a holy relic, his eyes wide with awe. He turns it over in his huge hands. "Thank you, miss. Thank you." He turns and lumbers away, a man armed with something more powerful than his musket, a legal right. This is her choice. This is her battlefield. While men like Adams debate grand strategy in Philadelphia, Eunice is here, in the mud and the fear, fighting a different kind of war. She is defending the defenders. She spends her days translating the high-minded ideals of the Revolution into practical, tangible protections for the men who are bleeding for them. She helps illiterate boys write letters home, carefully weaving their clumsy, heartfelt words into sentences that will reassure a mother or a sweetheart, then adding a final, legally sound paragraph that turns the letter into a last will and testament, ensuring their meager pay goes where they want it to. She fights the small tyrannies of military life, the corrupt quartermasters, the overzealous officers, with the same cold fire she once turned on loyalist merchants. Her arrogance is their shield. Her adventurous spirit has found its cause not in victory, but in service. Late in the afternoon, as a weary quiet settles over the camp, a figure detaches himself from a patrol returning from the lines. He is lean and wiry, moving with an economy of motion that makes him seem to glide over the uneven ground. He wears the deerskin leggings and fringed shirt of a frontiersman. It is William Howe, her cousin, the scout. He stops before her makeshift desk, and the weariness you saw in her expression softens into something else. A deep, familial affection laced with profound anxiety. "Will," she says, her voice losing its sharp edge. "Eunice." He nods, his face grim. He accepts the tin cup of water she offers and drinks it in one long draught. His calm is a practiced thing, the stillness of a man who has learned to live with constant danger. "It's bad," he says, his voice low. "Worse than they're saying back here. The redcoats are professionals. They move like a machine. Our boys, they're brave, but they're green. They broke and ran at the first charge." Quote, Eunice's jaw tightens. She looks past him, toward the sound of the guns. The cost, which she had seen in a mother's tear, is now being tallied in a rout. "What do you need?" "Everything," he says with a humorless smile. "But right now?" "Powder." "The shipment we were promised from the depot at Chester is a day late. The men on the right flank have 5 rounds apiece. If Howe's regulars push again, the line will collapse." Eunice is already on her feet. The lawyer's mind is racing, processing the new information. The depot at Chester. The promised shipment. "The wagon master for that route is a man named Fry," she says, a new, dangerous energy in her voice. "A Quaker. He signed a contract, but his conscience has made him slow to fulfill it. The Congressional Committee is too polite to press a man of God." "He needs pressing," William says flatly. "Then he will be pressed." She turns to her small table, gathering her papers with decisive movements. The mask of the advocate is firmly back in place. The adventurous spark is now a burning fire. "William, find Colonel Prescott. Tell him to have 2 armed men ready to ride with me in 10 minutes. Quote. Her cousin raises an eyebrow but doesn't question her. He knows that look. It's the same look of absolute certainty she's had since they were children, the one that meant she was about to climb a tree she'd been forbidden to climb or argue a point until her opponent simply collapsed from exhaustion. As she strides through the chaotic camp, her dark skirt kicking up dust, you see the full measure of her choice. She is not merely supporting the army. She is becoming a part of its sinew, its nerve, its will. She will not fire a musket, but her words, sharp and legally binding, will deliver the powder to the men who do. She is marching to her own kind of war, her face set with the grim, terrifying, and exhilarating knowledge that she is no longer just a spectator to history. She is making it. The fight for a nation's soul has begun, and Eunice Lee has just fired her first shot. The fire you saw in Eunice's eyes is the last warmth you will feel for a long time. The world bleeds out its color, draining from the vibrant greens of summer fields to the sullen, muddy browns of a brutal autumn retreat. New York is lost. The great victory bells of July are a mocking echo, drowned out by the steady, funereal beat of a retreat across New Jersey. The hurricane has not just made landfall. It has scoured the coast, leaving behind a wreckage of men and hope. And then comes the cold. It arrives not as a gentle dusting of snow, but as a cruel, invasive presence. It seeps through the worn soles of your boots, turning the mud to iron-hard ruts that break ankles and cartwheels. It worms its way through the threadbare wool of your coat, a tangible entity that settles deep in your bones and refuses to leave. The sky turns the color of lead, a permanent, oppressive ceiling that presses down on the landscape, and the wind, a razor-sharp thing born in the north, never, ever stops. It shrieks through the skeletal branches of the trees, tears at the tattered canvas of the tents, and carries the sound of hacking coughs from one end of the wretched camp to the other. This is Valley Forge. Though it is not yet the place that will be immortalized in history, it is the feeling. It is the spirit of a dozen such camps, a purgatory of ice and starvation. You walk the lines, and the misery is a physical force. Men huddle around sputtering, smoky fires, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollowed out by hunger and despair. They are wrapped in rags, some without shoes, their feet bound in bloody strips of cloth. The grand blue and buff uniforms are a distant memory, replaced by a patchwork of misery. The air is a foul miasma of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, sickness, and the gut-wrenching smell of horseflesh being boiled in rusty kettles. This is the arithmetic of revolution the delegates in Philadelphia never truly calculated. For every man lost to a British musket ball, 10 are taken by dysentery, by fever, by the slow, grinding death of starvation in the numbing cold. You watch a boy, no older than the soldier's son you saw on the street in Boston, trying to write a letter. His hands are so stiff with cold, he can barely hold the charcoal stub. His knuckles are split and bleeding. He gives up, slumping against the rough log wall of his hut, his breath pluming in the frigid air as a tear freezes on his cheek. The glorious cause has been reduced to this. The simple, desperate wish for a crust of bread, for a dry blanket, for the feeling of warmth to return to your own frozen feet. The nation Eunice championed is dying in its infancy, choking on the ice. It is in the heart of this frozen hell that you find her. Her office is a tent, barely larger than a coffin, pitched near the crude structure serving as the camp hospital. The canvas is stiff with ice, and the wind drums a ceaseless, maddening tattoo against its walls. Inside, the cold is just as bitter, the only light coming from a single stinking tallow candle that sputters and dances, threatening to give up at any moment. And there she is, Eunice Lee. She is wrapped in a heavy wool cloak, her face pale, her lips tinged with blue, but her eyes still burn. She sits on a crate, another serving as a desk. Her fingers, wrapped in fingerless wool gloves, are stiff, but they still move with precision. Before her sits a soldier, his arm in a filthy sling, his face a mask of weary pain. He is dictating, and she is writing, her quill scratching against the precious sheet of paper. "And tell Mary the cow is hers now," the soldier says, his voice raspy, "and the 2 acres bordering the creek." It's not much, but it's hers. Legal-like. Eunice doesn't look up. Her focus is absolute. "Does Mary have the deed to the main property?" she asks, her voice crisp, cutting through the cold. The soldier shakes his head. "My father has it. He don't approve of Mary. Or the cause." Quote, Eunice's quill pauses. She looks up, her dark gaze pinning the soldier. The lawyer is fully present. "Your father is a loyalist?" "He calls himself a man of peace, but his peace looks a lot like the king's boot on our necks." Quote, a flicker of something, not sympathy, but fierce protective energy, crosses Eunice's face. "The land was deeded to you?" "Yes, miss, on my 21st birthday." "Then it is yours to dispense." "He has no claim." She turns back to the paper, and the quill flies, scratching out clauses and conditions, her legal mind building a fortress of words around this one soldier's meager legacy. She is not just writing a will. She is waging a war against a Tory father, ensuring this man's sacrifice will mean something for the woman he loves, even if he never returns. The arrogance that once seemed a social failing is now this soldier's greatest weapon. Eunice's absolute certainty in her own correctness, in the power of the law she wields, becomes a shield for the powerless. She finishes, sands the document with a pinch of grit from a small pouch, and folds it carefully. "This is a copy," she explains. "It will be sent with the next dispatch rider to a trusted associate in your village. The original will be filed with the records of the Congress. Your father will not be able to touch it." Quote, the soldier's eyes fill with a relief so profound it is painful to watch. He tries to thank her, but the words catch in his throat. He just nods, a single, sharp dip of his head, a gesture of fealty to the one person in this frozen wasteland who has given him power. This is what she does. Day after day, as the army starves and freezes, she fights. She doesn't carry a musket, but she battles the despair that is a more insidious enemy than General Howe's army. After the soldiers are gone for the night, you watch her by the guttering candlelight, her own meager rations of hard bread and dried meat untouched beside her. She pulls out another set of papers. These are not legal briefs. They are dispatches for the New England Beacon, the Patriot newspaper. Her adventurous spirit, which once thrilled at verbal combat in a warm office, now finds its outlet in this, sending words like fiery arrows back into the world of the living. You look over her shoulder, the candle flame throwing your combined shadow, large and distorted, against the icy canvas wall. Her handwriting is sharp, angry, impassioned. "They speak of our retreat," she writes. "They whisper in the warm taverns of Philadelphia and Boston that the cause is lost, that our army has melted away like the snows of yesteryear. Let them whisper. They do not know the men I see. They do not see the farmer from New Hampshire who lost 2 toes to frostbite and yet stands his post. They do not know the boy from Virginia who uses his own shirt for bandages to tend to a friend. They mistake our retreat for defeat. They are wrong. This is not a retreat, it is a tempering. Steel is not made in a gentle fire. It is forged in the furnace, beaten on the anvil, and plunged into the bitter cold. We are that steel. And when the spring comes, we will be a sword in the hand of liberty, sharp and terrible and true. Let the timid stay by their hearths. The future is being purchased here, in the cold and the dark, by men who have nothing left to give but their last defiant breath." She pauses, dipping the quill again, her jaw set. This is her faith. A hard, cold, angry faith, born of what she witnesses every day. She is a chronicler of suffering, but also a prophet of resilience. Her words are a stark contrast to the grim reality around you, and yet they are the only thing holding it at bay. Her cousin, William Howe, slips silently into the tent, a ghost in deerskin. He carries 2 tin cups of something that steams, a thin, weak-looking broth. He hands one to her. The comb he wears is frayed at the edges, his face etched with a deeper exhaustion than you've seen before. "They're eating their shoes, Eunice," he says, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Literally, boiling the leather to make a soup." Eunice takes a sip of the broth, not flinching at its foul taste. She looks at her cousin, her expression softening for a moment, the iron will giving way to the weary woman beneath. "And you?" "I'm a scout," he says with a faint ghost of a smile. "I know how to find nuts and roots the others miss. We'll manage." The two of them sit in silence for a long moment, a shared island of quiet understanding in the vast, howling wilderness of the war. His survival depends on his knowledge of the physical world, the lay of the land, the track of an animal, the sound of a twig snapping. Hers depends on her knowledge of the world of ideas, the turn of a legal phrase, the power of a well-aimed word, the shape of an argument. Here, in the frozen heart of the revolution, you see with perfect clarity that they are two sides of the same desperate coin. "Washington is planning something," William says finally, staring into his cup. "He's asking for reports. The river, the ice flows, the Hessian patrols on the other side. He's not the kind of man to sit still and die." Quote, a new light enters Eunice's eyes, the fire flaring up again, chasing away some of the cold. The mention of action, of a plan, however desperate, ignites her adventurous soul. The weariness recedes, replaced by the familiar, sharp intelligence. "Then he will need men who believe they can win," she says, looking down at the article she just wrote. Her words are not just for the people back home. They are for the men here. They are an act of will, an attempt to conjure belief out of thin air, to forge a sword of hope in the coldest, darkest winter of a nation's birth. The grip of winter is absolute, its icy fingers squeezing the very life from the rebellion. But here, in this frozen tent, a single candle still burns, and a woman's words are trying to hold back the dark. The words she writes are a shield against the dark, but the cold is a physical enemy, and it does not read. In the days that follow, a new kind of quiet settles over the camp. It is not the quiet of despair, but the tense, humming silence of purpose. William was right. Washington is planning something. You see it in the way patrols are doubled along the riverbank, their eyes not on the camp but on the churning, ice-choked water. You see it in the way blacksmiths work through the night, their hammers ringing a desperate rhythm as they try to mend broken wagon wheels and sharpen dulled bayonets. The army is a great wounded beast, gathering itself for one last, desperate lunge. The men move with a grim resolve, their hunger a cold knot in their bellies, but their eyes are fixed on their officers, waiting for the word that will either deliver them or destroy them. Hope, when it comes, arrives on a half-frozen horse. He is a dispatch rider, a boy of maybe 18, his face raw from the wind and his cloak caked with frozen mud. He sways in the saddle, exhausted, clutching a leather satchel as if it were the Holy Grail. He is bound for Washington's headquarters, but the news he carries cannot be contained in a sealed envelope. It spills from him in ragged breaths as a sergeant helps him from his horse. "France," the boy gasps to the men who gather around him, his voice a cracked whisper. "The Marquis de Lafayette. He's with us. They're sending ships, money." The word hangs in the frigid air. France. At first, no one reacts. The men just stare, their minds too numb with cold and hunger to process the information. It sounds like a delirious fantasy, another rumor born of desperation. A nation of kings helping a nation of rebels? It is impossible. But the dispatch rider, despite his exhaustion, has an urgency in his eyes that is undeniable. He is hurried away toward the general's quarters, but he has already lit the fuse. The word spreads. Not as a shout, but as a whisper, passed from one chapped blue-lipped man to another. France. It moves from hut to hut, from one smoky fire to the next. France. It is a foreign, almost magical sound. You watch it happen, see the change ripple through the camp like a physical wave. A man who was slumped over, staring into the embers of a dying fire, slowly straightens his back. Another, who had been hacking with a lung-deep cough, looks up, his eyes suddenly clear. And then the disbelief breaks. It starts with a single, cracked laugh from a grizzled veteran, a man who hadn't smiled in months. The laugh is picked up by another, and another, until a ragged, improbable cheer erupts from the center of the camp. It's a weak, hoarse sound, but it is a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. Men clap each other on the back, their faces splitting into grins that show gums bleeding from scurvy. They are still starving. They are still freezing. But for the first time in a long time, they are not hopeless. You feel it yourself, a sudden, dizzying lightness. The oppressive weight of the leaden sky seems to lift. The wind, for a moment, doesn't feel quite so sharp. The future, which for months has been a black, featureless wall, suddenly has a door in it. You share in their giddy relief, laughing along with men whose names you don't know, united in the single brilliant spark of possibility. Victory is no longer an abstract prayer, it is a strategic probability. You find Eunice outside her tent, watching the improbable celebration. William stands beside her, his arms crossed over his chest. A rare, faint smile touches his lips. Eunice's expression is more complex. The fire is there in her eyes, burning brighter than ever, but it is a calculating fire. "So, the King of France finds a use for our rebellion after all," she says, her voice low. "A convenient stick to beat the British with." "Does it matter why they help?" William asks. "As long as they help, the men have a reason to fight again. Look at them." He's right. The energy is transformative. Men are cleaning their muskets with a renewed vigor, their movements no longer sluggish but sharp, purposeful. They are talking, boasting, imagining the arrival of French warships in New York Harbor, their bright flags snapping in the wind. "It always matters why," Eunice murmurs, her gaze distant. You know she is back in the Congress Hall, hearing the debates, remembering the fears of trading one master for another. This aid will have a price, a debt. But she turns her head, and her eyes meet yours, a flicker of her old adventurous arrogance returning. "It is a price we will be able to pay, because we will win. This changes everything." Quote, she looks at the celebrating soldiers, and her lawyer's mind gives way to the propagandists. The shield she has been holding against the dark has just been reinforced with foreign steel. She turns and disappears into her tent. You know that tonight, her dispatches to the New England Beacon will not just be about grim resilience, they will be about victory. The news that sets the Patriot camp alight lands like a funeral shroud over Boston. You feel the shift as the scene dissolves. The raw hope of the camp replaced by the cold, stifling paranoia of James Madison's workshop. The shutters are still bolted. The silence is still absolute. But now it is the silence of a tomb. Madison has heard the news, not from a breathless dispatch rider, but from a trusted source. A whispered conversation in a dark alley with a man who still receives secret letters from London, France. The word echoes in the gloom of his shop, a death knell for the world he understands. He stands before his workbench, but he is not working. His delicate tools lie untouched. In his hands he holds the polished silver gorget he was making for the British major. He runs a thumb over its smooth, curved surface, a useless relic of an authority that is now being challenged by another global power. His confidence, the easy, sneering superiority you saw on the street, has curdled into a cold, venomous fear. This is no longer a local uprising to be put down by superior force. This is the world turning upside down. His actions, you see now, have become more frantic. He is no longer just a disgruntled loyalist. He is an active saboteur. On his desk, beside a half-eaten meal of stale bread and cheese, lies a stack of newly printed pamphlets. You lean closer, reading the title, the ink still smelling sharp and bitter in the close air. The French Snake in the American Eden, a warning against popish tyranny. You watch him work, his movements furtive and quick. He is not a public firebrand like Eunice. His war is fought in the shadows. He is composing a letter, his handwriting a tight, angry script. It is addressed to a contact in New York, a merchant with access to the British command. The rebels are emboldened by these rumors from France, he writes. They are fools, of course. They cannot see they are trading a benevolent father for a Catholic serpent. But their morale is dangerously high. This information must be spread. Emphasize the cost. Tell them the French will demand their land, their fish, their lumber. Tell them the French troops will be quartered in their homes, not as allies, but as conquerors. Sow discord between their officers and the so-called Marquis. Most importantly, we must disrupt their supply lines. The wagon master Fry, the Quaker I mentioned, remains a weak point. Pressure must be applied. A few missing shipments of powder or grain before they can mount a new offensive could break them for good. He is a spider spinning a web of lies and disruption. His arrogance has been stripped away, leaving only a desperate, dangerous resolve. He is driven now by a fear so profound it has become its own kind of courage. The fear of anarchy, the fear of the mob he saw in the streets, the fear of losing everything he has built. He looks around his silent, orderly shop. This is his civilization. Outside is the chaos, and he will do anything to keep it at bay. A sharp rap on the shuttered door makes him start, instantly sweeping the incriminating letter under a pile of sketches. He goes to the door, presses his ear against the wood. "It's me," a low voice says. Madison unbolts the door just enough to let a man slip inside. The man is well dressed, but his face is pale, his eyes darting nervously. It is the portly merchant, Master Gable, the very man Eunice had intimidated in the newspaper office months ago. But his patriotic zeal, it seems, was short-lived. "They're posting new loyalty oaths, Madison," Gable whispers, wringing his hands. "They're seizing the property of anyone who refuses to sign. My warehouse, my ships, they'll take everything." Quote. Madison gives a cold, mirthless smile. "Did you think their liberty was free, Master Gable? I warned you. I warned all of you." He gestures to the stack of pamphlets. "Help me distribute these. Remind people what kind of allies they are welcoming. Frighten them. It's our only chance." Quote. Gable looks at the pamphlets, his face a miserable portrait of fear and indecision. He is a man caught between two terrifying forces. Madison watches him, his eyes like ice. The last vestiges of the confident silversmith are gone, replaced by the grim determination of a counter-revolutionary. He sees the wavering allegiances, the fear, the greed, and he knows these are the weapons he has left. While Eunice Lee uses the law as her sword and her words to build a nation's hope, James Madison uses deceit as his dagger, trying to poison that hope before it can ever take root. The war has a new front now, and you are standing right on the battle line. The spring is coming, and with it, the French. And in a frozen camp and a darkened workshop, two opposing wills are sharpening their blades, preparing for a fight that will determine the fate of a continent. The thaw comes not as a gentle promise, but as a muddy, chaotic flood. The ice on the Delaware cracks and groans, and the world, for months a study in black and white and gray, bleeds back into hesitant color. The spring brings with it French ships on the horizon and something even more potent, a plan. The army, the tempered steel Eunice wrote of, is honed and sharpened. It marches out of its frozen hell, not in retreat, but in pursuit. The war moves, and you move with it, drawn into the furnace of a New Jersey summer. The sound is what hits you first. Not the thunder of cannon that has just fallen silent, but a wild, ragged human roar. It's the sound of 1,000 men, pushed beyond the limits of endurance, finding their voices all at once. It's a sound of disbelief melting into delirious triumph. You stand on a gently rising hill overlooking the fields near Monmouth Courthouse. The air is thick with the sulphurous bite of burnt gunpowder and the coppery smell of blood, but beneath it is the sweet scent of clover from the fields the fighting has just churned into mud. Below you is the tangible proof of victory. Red-coated bodies lie twisted in the high grass alongside the blue and buff of the Continentals. The cost is stark, laid out in the open for the carrion birds to see. But for the first time, the cost feels like a price paid, not just a life lost. You see captured cannons, their brass barrels gleaming in the oppressive afternoon sun. A line of Hessian soldiers, their elaborate mustaches drooping in defeat, are marched past, their expressions sullen and shocked. They were professionals. They were not supposed to lose to an army of starving farmers. The Continental soldiers are almost unrecognizable from the hollow-eyed specters of the winter camp. They are still thin, their uniforms still ragged, but they stand tall. Their faces are black with powder and striped with sweat, but their eyes burn with a fierce, wild joy. You see a lanky boy from a Virginia regiment, the same one you saw trying to write a letter with frozen fingers, now perched atop a captured cannon, waving a tattered flag and screaming himself hoarse. It is a resurrection. The army of ghosts has become an army of men. Your gaze finds William Howe, leaning against a split-rail fence, cleaning his long rifle with the same calm, methodical movements you saw in the newspaper office what feels like a lifetime ago. A bloody bandage is wrapped around his forearm, but he seems not to notice it. He watches the celebration with a scout's quiet assessment. He sees the victory, but he also sees the gaps in the lines, the friends who are not celebrating. "They held," he says to you, without looking up. his voice low and filled with a kind of weary wonder. The training the Baron gave them at Valley Forge, it worked. They stood their ground and fired in volleys. They didn't break. He shakes his head slowly. They fought like soldiers. And then you see her. Eunice Lee stands near a large oak tree that serves as a makeshift field headquarters. She holds a list, taking down the names of the wounded as they are brought to the surgeons. Her practical dress is stained with mud and a few dark, ominous spots of blood. Her face is pale with exhaustion, but as she looks out over the scene of victory, her expression is one of profound, unyielding vindication. Every argument she ever made, every word she ever wrote, every right she ever fought for, it has all led to this moment. The abstract ideal of liberty has been proven on the field, paid for in blood, and has won. Her eyes scan the field and lock onto William. She gives him a sharp, proud nod. He nods back. It is a conversation without words, an acknowledgement of the shared journey from the frozen dark to this brilliant, brutal sun. The turning point has come. The war is not over, but it is now winnable, and everyone on this field knows it. The victory at Monmouth changes the air you breathe. When you return to Boston weeks later with Eunice, who has been summoned to consult on maritime prize laws for the new French allies, the city feels different. The tentative hope has hardened into a confident, almost swaggering resolve. The streets are crowded, and the taverns are full of men loudly toasting General Washington and the King of France. The city is a patriot stronghold now, and the few loyalists who remain walk with their heads down, their presence tolerated only as long as they remain silent and invisible. It's this new, confident Boston that leads you back to where it all started. The cramped, ink-stained office of the New England Beacon. Eunice has an article to deliver, a triumphant piece celebrating the victory and outlining the legal framework for Franco-American cooperation. As you approach the door, you hear a voice from within, a low, cutting voice, dripping with the old, familiar contempt. A temporary victory, bought with the blood of children and paid for with a French leash. Do not be a fool, sir. When this madness is over, and it will be over, those of us who remained loyal to the law and to civilization will be remembered. Those who printed this seditious filth will be swinging from a rope. You push open the door. The printer, a nervous man named Finch, who replaced the terrified Master Gable, stands behind his press, his face pale. And there, standing before him, his back to you, is James Madison. He is impeccably dressed as always, a stark contrast to the grubby workshop, but he looks thinner. The arrogance is still there, but it's brittle now, a veneer over a deep, simmering desperation. "Master Madison," Eunice says. Her voice is deceptively calm, but you feel the air in the room drop 20 degrees. Madison freezes. He turns slowly, and when he sees Eunice, his face contorts into a mask of pure loathing. The last time they met, he had the weight of the world's greatest empire behind him. Now he is a cornered rat in a city that despises him. "Miss Lee," he sneers, recovering quickly. "Come to spread more of your pretty lies? Or perhaps to gloat?" It is a vulgar look, even for you. Quote, "I've come to deliver the news," Eunice says, stepping fully into the room. She places her manuscript on a stack of paper, the movement deliberate, proprietary, something you seem to have trouble accepting. "We are winning." "You've won a skirmish," Madison scoffs, his hand gesturing dismissively. "You mistake a single bloody day for a war. General Clinton's army remains intact. The Royal Navy still controls the seas. This is merely the death rattle of your insane little rebellion." Quote, "Is that what you tell yourself in your shuttered workshop at night?" Eunice takes a step closer, her adventurous spirit now a predator's instinct. She is circling him. "That this is all just a bad dream? You whisper about law and civilization, but you work in the shadows, spreading lies and dissent like a plague." Quote, Madison's eyes narrow. "I work to preserve the order you are so desperate to destroy. You speak of liberty, but you offer only chaos. You ally yourself with a papist tyrant and call it freedom. You are hypocrites and fools." "And you are a traitor, Master Madison," Eunice says, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous pitch. The printer, Finch, shrinks back against his press, wishing he could dissolve into the walls. Not to a king 3,000 miles away, but to the men bleeding in the fields for the very ground you stand on, the men you actively work to sabotage. A flicker of genuine fear crosses Madison's face. I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't you? Eunice's smile is a razor. Let me refresh your memory. A certain wagon master, a Quaker named Fry, a man whose conscience was preventing him from delivering powder to the front lines. A conscience, I find, that was being heavily bolstered by a loyalist silversmith with a talent for persuasion and threats. The blood drains from Madison's face. He is exposed. You feel the satisfaction of the moment like a physical blow, a clean, sharp, and total victory. Eunice has not just won the argument. She has revealed his secret war. But he is not broken. The desperation hardens into pure, defiant hatred. You have no proof. At the moment, Eunice concedes, her voice like ice, I have only the word of a terrified wagon master who found his courage when he saw his son march off to battle with the very powder he was paid to withhold. But in this city, under this new government, his word will be enough to open an investigation. Your shop will be searched. Your associates questioned. Men like Master Gable, for instance. He is a fearful man. I imagine he will be quite cooperative. This is it, the final turn of the screw. She is not just threatening him. She is laying out the mechanics of his destruction, using the very tools of law he claims to revere. He stares at her, his chest rising and falling rapidly. For a moment you think he might lunge at her. His rage is so palpable, but he contains it. He straightens his waistcoat with a twitch of his hands, pulling the mask of cold superiority back over his face, though it no longer fits. This is your nation, then? He spits, his voice thick with venom. A nation built on intimidation, rumor, and mob justice? Where a woman with a sharp tongue can ruin a man on a whim? You have not built a republic, Miss Lee. You have built a tyranny of the righteous, and you will find it consumes its own children. Quote. He turns on his heel. Enjoy your victory, he throws over his shoulder. It will be a bitter one. Quote. He storms out of the office, shoving past you without a glance, his immaculate figure vanishing into the bright, hostile sunlight of the new Boston. A profound silence fills the room, broken only by the nervous breathing of the printer. The smell of ink and old paper is the same as it was that first day, but everything is changed. Eunice stands motionless for a long moment, the fire of the confrontation slowly banking. You see the cost of the victory in the sudden slump of her shoulders, the weariness that settles back into her eyes. His final words hang in the air, a poisoned dart that found its mark. The celebration of the battlefield feels very far away. She looks at you, a silent acknowledgement passing between you. You have both seen the beginning, the desperate winter, and now this, the brutal turning point. The enemy is no longer just an army across a field. It is a neighbor. It is a belief. And it is not defeated. It has only been driven back into the shadows, where it will wait. The war for the soul of the nation, you realize, is only just beginning. The silence Madison leaves behind is a physical weight. Finch the printer, who had been a statue of terror, finally exhales, a ragged, whistling sound. He fusses with a stack of paper, avoiding Eunice's eyes, avoiding the invisible crater her confrontation has left in the middle of his office. Eunice herself doesn't move. She stares at the empty doorway through which Madison vanished, her triumph already tasting like ash. His parting words, a tyranny of the righteous, have burrowed under her skin. You watch her wrap her arms around herself, a gesture of self-protection so uncharacteristic it's startling. The adventurous fire in her eyes has dimmed, replaced by a flicker of doubt, the first you have ever seen there. The victory feels hollow. The road ahead suddenly longer and shrouded in a deeper fog. That road stretches on. The single brilliant victory at Monmouth is not the end of the war, but merely the end of the beginning. The seasons turn, each one bringing its own particular hardship. The swaggering confidence that filled Boston's streets after the battle settles into a grim, stubborn endurance. The war grinds on, a relentless, hungry machine that consumes men, money, and hope. It moves south, leaving New England in a state of anxious limbo. The headlines in the New England Beacon, which once blared with triumph, now speak of stalemates in the Carolinas, of supply shortages and the endless, draining need for new recruits. You watch Eunice change. The lawyer's arrogance remains, but it is no longer a performance. It has become a necessary, functional tool. She is a permanent fixture now in the halls of the Massachusetts State House. Her dark dress, a familiar sight among the somber suits of the delegates. She is relentless. You see her cornering merchants who are hoarding grain, her voice a whip cracking with legal citations until they release their stores for the army. You watch her drafting maritime laws that are both an invitation to French privateers and a warning to anyone who would prey on them. She fights a war of clauses and contracts, her energy a constant, burning rebuke to the weariness that threatens to swamp the cause. Her adventurous spirit is no longer satisfied with single combat. It is invested in the slow, arduous, and frustratingly dull work of building a nation while it is still at war. The fire is still there, but it burns with a lower, hotter, more dangerous flame. She is building the House of Liberty, and she will tolerate no cracks in its foundation. The news from the South is a constant low fever. Charleston falls. The words arrive on a ship, a story of siege and surrender that chills the hopeful Boston air. And then comes the word Camden. It is a name that becomes a synonym for disaster, a rout so total, so devastating, it feels like the cause itself has been broken in two. The British, under Cornwallis, have shattered the Southern Army. The stories that trickle back north are a litany of horror, of militia throwing down their muskets and running, of brave Continentals being cut to pieces, of a retreat that became a panic-stricken flight. It is a hot, humid August afternoon when the letter arrives. Not an official dispatch, but a single, folded sheet of paper, the seal broken, its surface stained with what could be water or sweat or tears. A young lieutenant, his arm in a sling, and his eyes still wide with the shock of what he has seen, delivers it to Eunice's small, cluttered office at the State House. He hands it to her with a reverence reserved for last rites. She takes it, her expression unreadable. You stand by the window, watching the busy street below, but all your attention is on her, on the crinkle of the paper in her hands. She recognizes the handwriting. It is from a colonel in the Delaware Regiment, a man she knows, a man who commanded the Scouts. You watch her read. The sharp, intelligent face goes utterly blank. The fire in her eyes, the one that has burned so steadily through defeat and despair, simply goes out. Her hand, the one holding the letter, begins to tremble. It is a slight tremor at first, but it grows until the paper is rattling. She sinks into her chair, her other hand coming up to cover her mouth, but she makes no sound. The silence in the room is absolute, more profound than any scream. You already know. You don't need to read the words to understand the news they contain. William Howe, her cousin, the calm scout, the ghost in deerskin, is gone. After a long, terrible moment, her hand falls away from her face. Her eyes are dry, but they are the eyes of a stranger, hollowed out, seeing something you cannot. She reads a line from the letter aloud, her voice a flat, dead monotone. Held the bridge at Rugeley's Mill. He and 5 riflemen. The rest of us were in full retreat. The cavalry was on our heels. He said the general had to get away. He said the intelligence was more important. She looks up from the letter, her gaze unfocused, directed at the wall behind you. He knew it was a suicide action. He chose it. He smiled, the colonel says. He smiled and said to tell me the tree was worth the climb. Quote, the childhood reference, a secret password between cousins, is a blow more terrible than any cannon shot. It breaks through the dam of her control. A single, dry sob escapes her, a ragged, ugly sound torn from the deepest part of her. She crumples the letter in her fist, her knuckles turning white. The adventurous spirit that drove them both, that led her to argue with loyalists and him to scout behind enemy lines, has led him to this, a bridge, a handful of men, and a final, calm, calculated sacrifice. The cost of this war, which she has so eloquently written about, so fiercely litigated, has finally come home. It is not an abstract number of casualties on a list. It is William. It is the boy who climbed trees with her. It is the man whose quiet calm was the anchor for her fire. You want to say something, to offer a word of comfort, but you know there are no words. The grief in the room is a living thing, vast and suffocating. You can only stand and bear witness as the formidable Eunice Lee, the woman who could stare down generals and intimidate merchants, is shattered by the loss of one quiet man. She does not weep. The moment of collapse passes, and something else takes its place. She straightens in her chair, the crumpled letter still clutched in her fist. The emptiness in her eyes is slowly replaced by a new light. It is a cold light, a merciless light, It is the fire, but it has been reforged in the ice of her grief into something hard and sharp and utterly unbreakable. Her arrogance, her intellect, her adventurous soul, all of it is being channeled now, focused into a single point. She rises from her chair and walks to the large map of the colonies that hangs on her wall. Her finger traces the disastrous path of the retreat from Camden, then moves north. She is no longer just a lawyer fighting for a principle. She is a woman with a debt to collect, a blood debt. They will pay for it, she whispers, her voice no longer dead, but filled with a terrifying, quiet promise. Cornwallis, Tarleton, all of them, they will pay for every inch of this ground. Quote, she turns from the map, her face a pale, determined mask. The loss has not broken her. It has consecrated her. She is no longer just fighting for a new nation. She is fighting to build a nation worthy of William's sacrifice. The long road ahead is no longer a burden to be endured. It is a path to vengeance. And she will walk it to its bitter end, her grief the fuel, her mind the weapon, until the men who killed her cousin are either defeated or destroyed. You look at her, at the cold fire in her eyes, and you know with absolute certainty that God should have mercy on any man who now stands in her way. But that is a story for another night. That cold fire in her eyes, that merciless promise of a debt to be paid in blood, that is a path too dark to walk just now. We will not end our journey here, in the bitter chill of 1780, standing in the shadow of her grief. Let us turn back. Let us leave the long, grim years of the war ahead and find a moment of grace, a flicker of warmth in the suffocating cold. Let us return to the end of that first impossible year, to a moment when a single desperate gamble paid off, and a cause that was all but dead drew a sudden, shuddering breath. The world resolves around you, not into the mud and chaos of Monmouth, or the frozen hell of Valley Forge, but into the hushed quiet of a December night. It is Christmas, 1776, or rather the day after. The air is sharp and clean and achingly cold, and it carries the scent of wood smoke and damp wool. Snow falls, not in a blizzard, but in a soft, steady, hypnotic curtain of white, muffling all sound, laying a blanket of peace over a landscape still scarred by the passage of armies. You are on the Pennsylvania side of the Delaware River. Across the churning, ice-clogged water lies Trenton. And, in this makeshift camp, there is a strange new feeling in the air. It is not triumph. It is not joy. It is something far more fragile and profound. It is the feeling of survival. The men here are the same gaunt, ragged soldiers you saw starving in the winter camps of your mind, but they are different. They have done the impossible. They crossed a frozen river in a storm, they marched on a superior force of professional soldiers, and they won. It was not a grand, war-ending victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. It was proof they were not yet beaten. You walk through the quiet camp. The snow crunches softly under your boots. Most of the men are asleep, huddled together for warmth in crude shelters, or simply lying in the snow with a single thin blanket pulled over them. They sleep the sleep of the utterly exhausted, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of banked campfires, looking impossibly young. A few are still awake. You see a small group sharing a pipe, their voices low and murmuring, the red glow of the tobacco. A small point of warmth in the vast, cold dark. You see a man carefully cleaning his musket by the firelight, his movements slow and deliberate, a ritual of care for the tool that just saved his life. He is not the boy from the newspaper office, but he could be his brother, his cousin. He has the same quiet intensity, the same oldness in his young eyes. This is the quiet triumph. Not the ringing of bells or the roar of a crowd, but the shared, unspoken understanding that they have faced the abyss and have not fallen in. You feel the weight of the year that is now ending, a year of soaring declarations and brutal defeats, of high-minded ideals and the grim reality of frozen feet. It has been a year that has asked everything of these men, and they have given it. And here, in the silent, falling snow, you feel the fragile promise of what is to come. Your steps lead you to a small stone farmhouse, its windows glowing with a warm, steady candlelight. This is a temporary headquarters, a place for officers to write their dispatches and plan their next move. Through the wavy glass of a window, you see her, Eunice Lee. She is sitting at a rough-hewn table, a wool shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She is writing. The familiar sight of her quills scratching across paper is a constant in this shifting, chaotic world. Her face is weary. The strain of the past few months, the desperate retreat across New Jersey, is etched around her eyes. But there is no despair in her expression. There is a fierce, focused concentration. This is the Eunice of 1E776, the woman whose arrogance is a weapon, whose adventurous spirit is fueled by the sheer audacity of the cause. The news of the victory at Trenton has reached her, and it is a profound vindication. Her work, her words, her tireless legal battles to secure supplies, they were not in vain. She pauses, looking up from her letter, her gaze going to the window. She looks out at the sleeping camp, at the soft, falling snow. She is not seeing an army of ragged rebels. She is seeing the sinew and bone of the nation she is fighting to build. A small, almost imperceptible smile touches her lips. It is not her usual sharp, predatory smile. It is something softer, more genuine. In this moment, her belief in the cause is not an intellectual argument. It is a palpable, living thing, proven by the impossible feat these men just accomplished. A figure moves through the snow outside, approaching the farmhouse. A lean, wiry man in deerskin, moving with a silent, fluid grace. He pauses at the door, speaks quietly to the sentry, and then you see his face for a moment in the spill of light from the doorway. It is William Howe. He is alive, he is whole. His calm, steady presence is a quiet anchor in the night. He gives a brief report to an officer, his voice too low to hear, and then he glances toward the window where Eunice sits. Their eyes meet for a fraction of a second across the cold night. A nod passes between them. A shared acknowledgement. We are still here, we are still fighting. He melts back into the darkness, a ghost of a future you have already witnessed, a poignant reminder of the price that has yet to be paid. Eunice turns back to her page, her quill flying with renewed purpose. You can almost hear the words she is writing, a dispatch for the New England Beacon that will turn this small, desperate victory into a legend. She will not write of the hunger or the cold. She will write of the courage. She will write of a river of ice crossed in the dead of night. She will write of a Hessian commander surprised at his Christmas festivities. She will craft the story that will give a nation the hope it needs to survive the winter. Her words are her weapon, and tonight they are sharp and true. You turn from the window, leaving her to her work. You walk back toward the fires, the snow still falling, a gentle shushing sound that quiets the world. The night deepens. The murmuring voices fall silent. The last waking soldier banks his fire, wraps himself in his blanket, and closes his eyes. The only sounds now are the whisper of the wind in the bare trees and the soft crackle of dying embers. The army sleeps. It is a fragile peace, a temporary reprieve. The war is far from over. There will be other winters, other defeats, other sorrows. But tonight there is this, a quiet moment of grace. A breath held between the storm that is past and the one that is yet to come. You feel the stillness settle into your own bones. The exhaustion of the long journey, the emotional weight of the year, begins to feel like a heavy, comforting blanket. The air is cold, but the quiet hope you feel is a warmth deep inside. The echo of the bells of July, the sting of Madison's sneer, the fire in Eunice's eyes, the quiet calm of William's presence. It all coalesces into this single, peaceful moment. The troubled birth of a nation has survived its first, most perilous day. A new year is just over the horizon. You can feel it, a gentle promise on the wind. Find a place to rest now, here in the quiet dark. Let the sound of the falling snow be your lullaby. The story of 1776 is over. Close your eyes. Sleep now. Dream of a nation's dawn.